taken a series of steps to reduce that dependency. And now, possibly, despite bordering Russia, you might be in a better position than some countries far further west. How have you done that, and what's the lesson for countries that are still reliant on Russian imports?
Yes, so we have a long history with our neighbor, and that has made us cautious. So phasing out natural gas is something that we have done for decades. Now, once the war started, the full-scale war, the pipeline gas stopped from Russia in May in 2022 already. We were ready for that. There was an LNG terminal in the region already existing, and quickly 2 more were built. And I guess that makes Europe more resilient now as well, because everyone now has extra LNG terminals, and we have a lot of supply. But yes, we haven't historically seen much of this cheap and reliable energy coming from our neighbor, and that has made us cautious and more prepared. The latest and the most major project recently was the desynchronization of our grids and synchronization to the Central European networks. That took like more than 10 years to complete. But in February this year, we did it. And we didn't start it in 2022. We started much earlier.
Yeah. And Victoria, I'm hoping your audio works now, so let me bring you in on just that point. I mean, obviously, Ukraine faces a bitterly cold winter and another winter under attack. But how symbolic and how important is it that actually now, at least the European Union has agreed in principle to vastly cut the amount of funds that it'll be sending to Russia to pay for tanks, bombs, drones, and soldiers' salaries? It was a good question, but I think we can't quite hear your answer just yet. So let me come back to you. Sonia, give me a sense of how ready our gas networks, our power networks, our grids, our industries are for this changeover from a partner on which we were so historically dependent and yet so kind of exposed to.
Well, I think we've talked already about how fast, how quick we can move. I think for electricity operators in Europe, security is in their DNA. And so, in fact, the war in Ukraine has actually, accelerated a lot of the need for, more integration, more resilience. But and working together with all agencies to make that happen. So for us in NSOE, we have already had long plans with our Baltic TSOs, also with Ukraine. And in some ways, the war in Ukraine has actually accelerated what we already had been looking for in terms of integration, resilience, better together, and more cooperation. So in some ways, it's actually created the impetus to get there faster, and also to find more innovative ways to do so in a more secure way. So back to this trilemma of affordability, security, and the decarbonization objective, being innovative. So I think we're all in our sort of
as well. And we don't have the excuse that you're in Ukraine.
No. So just to say that it's spurred us all on to deliver faster, quicker this infrastructure, to do so with, of course, security in mind, but also affordability and to focus on the idea that we're more energy independent and having choice through innovation, through decarbonization will help that. Yeah. Thank you.
And give me a sense, though, of how much concentrated work that's actually been, because many European countries showed really no intention to get off Russian gas, even in the immediate aftermath of the war. The reason they were forced off Russian gas was that Moscow decided to weaponize the supplies to try and punish Europe for supporting Ukraine. How much practical work has been done since that moment to try and actually solidify that and make sure that's a one-way street away from those risks?
Well, I suppose I see it a different way. I see it in the case that if you have options, quick options, more realizable options, such as a port or existing infrastructure for LNG, then you can have those options to move faster. And other countries which are more landlocked have to take a bit longer and have to find a way through this objective. But I do see all of them with that goal in mind.
Yeah. And Alberic, give me a sense then of the other things that Europe needs to consider when it comes to energy security, because we're not just talking about oil and gas anymore. There's a whole range of hybrid threats to our grids, to the way that people access energy, use energy, coming from Russia, coming from other hostile actors. How prepared is Europe to have that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, so energy security, as you said, now it's like different colors of the rainbow. So it's, you've got, not just security of supply, but security of supply chains, all the way from, critical raw materials, minerals, to, final components that you need for your energy infrastructure, for energy production, transmission, etc. And, when it comes to the integrity of our grids, the integrity of our energy infrastructure across the board, we are facing threats that already existed before, by the way. It's just that they're a lot more in the limelight today, and they've also intensified. The frequency of attacks, of incidents has increased significantly, particularly in the Baltic Sea. Where there's obviously lots of subsea cables, whether it's, by the way, energy infrastructure or telco infrastructure. You also have a lot of subsea telco infrastructure, and so that's at risk. And then the question is, how do you protect them, and how do you also navigate this the space we were in today, which is it's not a full-scale war between Europe and Russia, but it's not peacetime either. So what what is it that the military can do? What is it that an organization that NATO can do to protect that infrastructure? And what is it that it is the responsibility of the European Union? What is it that's the responsibility of the member states? And then the different layers at national level. That's something that's still a bit unclear in many cases at national level, especially in federal countries. And so that's something on which we need more clarity, and we need more communication also between say military intelligence, the military, and the civilian infrastructure operators. They need to be ready. They need to have enough critical components stockpiled. They need to have the necessary repair capabilities. They need to have the crisis response and recovery processes in place, and they need to work closely with security stakeholders. And so. Obviously, there's a lot that can be learned from the Ukraine experience, which also obviously is a lot more intense. Ukrainian energy infrastructure is to this day still getting pounded by the Russians. It's going to be a very tough winter for Ukraine, another one. And obviously European infrastructure operators are doing everything that's in their power to also provide components and support to the Ukrainians. But there's also a lot of things that Ukraine can teach us in terms of how to deal with these threats.
And I just want to pick up on the point about the shadow fleet, because that's something that Estonia has been quite literally on the front line with. And you have this, armada of aging tankers shipping fossil fuels, primarily oil, but some gas as well, in violation of international restrictions. And the political cost, the economic cost, the cost for Ukraine, and potentially the environmental cost if one of these things sinks again in European waters is huge. Give me a sense of what more the EU needs to do to defend against that, because that is a hybrid threat as well, right?
Yes, so we are somehow in the front line of these things, and have let's say in-depth experience with anchors from these ships. With the natural gas pipeline between Estonia and Finland a couple of years back, and then EstLink 2, our electricity interconnection. The shadow fleet obviously must be targeted by sanctions, effective sanctions as well. Europe has done a lot on that, and obviously we need to do more. And since the maritime law is super difficult, and I'm not claiming to be an expert on that, what we can do is approach via this environmental protection angle, because these ships, they are old, they're not maintained. We have checked several of them. You can always find loads and loads of faults. Some of them more easily fixed, some of them not. So if we all do these checks, and we keep imposing a high standard, then we will eventually drive this problem off, because the Baltic Sea is, if you take the environmental side, is a closed water system. If something happens environmentally, that impacts everyone, and if something happens to our cables, that also has a wide-ranging impact. And also, it takes a relatively long time to fix these issues. There's a lot of cables undersea, so we need to be mindful. But what we've also, and what's easier for us is that since Estonia is one of the smaller member states, so it's easier to get the communication going. So we have a very tight communication circle with both all of our relevant agencies and with our neighbors, EU neighbors, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. We are cooperating together, and also the Baltic Sea countries overall, cooperating together both onshore and offshore, higher level of protection.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've seen is that the shadow fleet increasingly is implicated in other hybrid threats as well, whether that's potential drone launches, suspected undersea sabotage. Sonia, just give me a sense of how prepared our energy networks are, particularly the ones that you work on, for these kind of hybrid threats, whether that's drones, whether that's individuals being paid through Telegram bots to go and commit acts of destruction, whether that's cyber threats.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, electricity infrastructure is what we call critical infrastructure. It's always been designated as such, important for security, both energy security, but also national security. Now, with these increased threats and what you see in Ukraine, it's actually rewritten the book on what is critical infrastructure and how to protect it. And so TSOs, operators, are looking at how they can become more resilient in that regard, and they're looking to see how they can address those threats, but also protect airspace, protect the regions around the substations and the various locations of electricity infrastructure, but also looking at redundancy and resilience if it is attacked and it is unavailable. So those are everyday jobs for operators of electricity, but now doing so in a more coordinated fashion with all agencies within each jurisdiction. And I think this is, as I said, Ukraine in the way it is protecting its network, but also dealing with the damage and how fast they can come back and quickly replace components and infrastructure, under very dire circumstances, under their own, defense policy. So this is something that now we are looking at across all of Europe. And as I said, the rule book or the guidance on this is changing every day. Yeah.
And do we need more civil preparedness? Is there? I mean, we saw a catastrophic blackout for, I believe, unrelated reasons across Iberia only this year. For the first time, it feels like things that people used to rely on and expect to work are going wrong. Some of it deliberately, some of it because of the transition that we've had away from fossil fuels, or the chronic underinvestment in grids, whatever it might be. Do you think people need to be aware that actually things can go wrong?
Well, I think, of course, I mean, even today we have our own sound system. You know what I'm saying? There's always redundancy with systems. So I think it is important that people realize what it takes to protect such infrastructure. Yeah. Also, when we look at trying to invest in countries, it can be difficult to invest. People sometimes want to understand why we need infrastructure, why we need critical investment. Obviously, losing it and not having electricity for even a split second can be quite disruptive. Of course, we have looked at critical hospitals and various sensitive use of electricity. But I think also all of us take for granted that we can have it at the touch of our hands, and that we have this access every day. And therefore, yes, it is important to recognize what it takes to protect it, what it takes to have it, and if you don't have it, what it can do in terms of disruption and chaos. So this is something that we definitely want to avoid, and we want to invest in our infrastructure in Europe to make it resilient for years to come, for generations to come. Yeah.
And we have a European Commission now that's warned people that they should stock up on essentials, whether that's medicine, torches, etc., to have in case of an emergency. Do you think these kind of low frequency, high cost energy security crises are something that we're prepared to navigate, Albrecht?
Yes and no, I guess.
I mean prepared in a societal sense as much as
in a societal sense,
policy
it very much depends on who you're talking about and what part of Europe you're talking about, right? I do think that the northern and eastern flanks are a lot more prepared psychologically and on the ground. I do think when you look at Western, Southern Europe, the mines are not really ready, even though I think it's a bit better than what it was 2 years ago. When I look at my home country, France, for instance, I think everything still feels a bit more distant, but the level of preparedness of institutions, companies, is a lot better than what it was 2 or 3 years ago. So it's a constant process. It has to be not just by the EU institutions and legislative processes, but it also needs to be driven by national politicians. The problem being that you don't want to freak people out. You don't want to scare them with big threats. But you should not underplay the threats either. And to come back also to close the previous issue we're talking about, I think we're talking about defending a lot, but I think we should be a lot more on the attack. And I think that's being discussed more seriously now at NATO level, counter-attacking.
Give me an example.
Well, we're basically, on the cyber front. So we're not talking about, having our own shadow fleet or anything like that. But we're talking about really like counterattacking on the cyber front, because we've been the target of Russian disinformation for decades now. We've been the target of hybrid threats for a couple of decades also. Again, it's only intensified in recent years. But we never really counterattack. We don't have our own, disinformation campaigns going on in Russia or other hostile states.
Well,
we don't.
I think we'd probably like to call them information campaigns if and when we start,
exactly.
rolling them out.
I think probably we should become more aggressive, and that's something, given the scale of the challenge, given the level of the threats in Europe. I don't think we should be hesitating anymore, and we should definitely be, launching cyber attacks against Russia. Very simple.
And it's a really interesting one where I think attitudes to the scale of the threat definitely do differ depending on where in Europe you're looking at. I mean, Estonia is obviously a country that has its own unique history of occupation, of threat, of kind of having to defend itself in many different senses. But there's still that question of, well, actually, fear is a huge part of the tactic that's being pushed onto Europeans. So how do you balance those two kind of competing instincts where you need people to take things seriously, but you don't want to terrify them needlessly?
Yes, that is an interesting and complex issue to deal with. Actually, a very good example of this was when we were about to synchronize the European networks. I mean, that was a major project, well known years in advance. Then the Estlink 2 cable was cut or damaged by an anchor. And then let's say, alert level of the people, Estonian people are more alert than average Europeans, I would guess. The alert level went higher, and people started thinking whether, will there be a blackout now that it's been switched? We were like, no, but it's been thought through. Hey, there's external experts who have reviewed. NSOE won't let us connect to European networks if we're not prepared. No, but what about this XYZ thing happening? So everyone became an energy expert, as everyone was a health expert a couple of years back, if you remember these mask times. So, but I think overall it made us stronger, because then the event happened, nothing happened. So everything was prepared, and people were like, okay, they do know what they're doing. Okay, so we just need to prove, and we also need to be mindful of the communication. In Estonia, we have for years said to people, hey, electricity outages can happen. I mean, every time winter starts, something falls on the lines, trees, something. There's a lot of forests in Estonia. Like electricity can go away without any hybrid, whatever threats like this. You need to be prepared for it. And there's guidance to people to have a reasonable size stockpile of things, so you would be ready and not have to worry and not have to wait for the state to come, because like if there is an event, then there's not some sort of guard or national group of people who comes and helps everyone. Like, it's not possible. They will go to the most critical parts first. So if you know what to do and you are certain that you can manage, then you are also less prone to these disinformation campaigns. But I mean, these things happen, and the online is full of these things, and now we have AI as well, so it's endless. And I think the only thing we can do is to prove with our actions every day that
these aren't true.
Yeah, that these aren't true, and then we can just move forward. There's lots of misinformation. Like, now, who is talking about COVID anymore? No one.
Yeah. And the synchronization with the European network was obviously a huge moment for your country, for the entire Baltic. I was in the region during the switchover, and there were efforts to sow fear and panic, and then they were all pretty abruptly proven to be nonsense. You had the lovely moment where all the leaders lit up the thing. It was quite a visual. Give me a sense of how involved you guys were in that in terms of providing support and best practice.
Well, the project for synchronization is essentially an NSOE project together with our Baltic TSOs. And it, as Janos said, 10 years it took essentially, in various infrastructure projects within the Baltic countries to get ready. Both upgrading lines, the generation capacity, and also then doing what it takes in terms of the rule book within Europe. So we follow one rule book in Europe for coordination of electricity, and the connection of the lines in February, or the final connection, because it was over many years, was a great testament to that, because we're essentially one system, one frequency, and part of one lifeblood, if I could call it that. And it means that we're together more resilient, we're able to back up each other and to deal with threats together, and to support more proactively the way in which the system needs to adapt to all that it has to do in the future, both in connecting new renewable generation, but also in addressing climate change, adaptation, etc. So for us, our three Baltic countries joining the continental European grid was a great achievement for all, and it adds to the security and resilience of Europe's grid.
Yeah, and I'm just being told as we're speaking that unfortunately Victoria won't be able to join us because of a power outage in Ukraine. So I think that's a stark reminder of the scale of the challenges the country faces. I wondered, Albrecht, if you could tell me a little bit, just in the few moments we have left, about the kind of level of European support for Ukraine, and how much you think kind of reinforcing their resilience is helping us to reinforce ours, but also just generally going into this winter, supplies of gas, access to power, how much we need to mobilize to ensure that remains stable.
Well, I think the first thing we should be doing outside the energy sector is, mobilize these Russian frozen assets. Once and for all, make a decisive step on this front. So that's, one simple thing that could definitely help Ukraine. Then they can, procure, whatever they need from, allies and partners. So that's one thing. And I think, another thing that, we could be doing is, we're talking about a 20th sanctions package. So far on Russia, so far the sanctions package they've not had a lot of teeth. We saw the US moving more aggressively a few weeks ago on sanctions on Lukoil and others that had actually quite a big impact on Russia and Russia's ability to wage war. But we see the US flip-flopping now, unfortunately. So it's kind of the same tactic repeated over and over again, apply maximal pressure, then take a step back and see if they're going to get to the negotiation table. So what I really hope for right now is that the US realizes that Russia is not going to get to the negotiation table. Actually, they are negotiating now. They were negotiating yesterday, I think, for over 5 hours. Nothing came out of it. I hope that the US gets tired of this quite quickly, and that they realize that, and again, that they're being played, and that they revert to the previous tactic, which was, again, maximal pressure through targeting Russia's oil exports towards India, towards China, towards the rest of the world.
And what can the US do to really tighten that screw and force Russia to the table?
To force them to the table, I think I think it's the tactic that they were following, that this approach. I mean, they were talking about the U.S. Congress about bone-crushing sanctions. I think it was Lindsey Graham, and it's a bipartisan bill that's still waiting. That hasn't been voted by Congress, but that could inflict a lot of damage to the Russian economy. That could virtually kill their oil exports and kill the Russian war machine. So that's been waiting for a few months now. I think the U.S. looked like it pivoted to Plan B on Russia by moving forward with oil sanctions, and Trump indicated also that he was ready to basically give the thumb up for this bone-crushing sanctions package. But then the 28-point plan arrived. Right now, that is on the table. So now they're trying to see if Russia is going to agree to something. Again, I hope that Russia does not agree and that we revert to the previous, do not agree to that deal, which is a rather good deal for Russia when you think about it. And you don't need to think about it very long, actually, to see that it's a pretty good deal for Russia. But yeah, so I just hope that the US goes back to the previous approach, and that the EU can actually follow with important sanctions on the Russian energy sector, and beyond that. Again, the last few sanctions package were not that effective, and we need something that's more impactful. And then beyond that, obviously, we need to keep working closely with the Ukrainian energy infrastructure operators. We need to keep, and that's NSOE does that. NSOE members do that. Make sure that they've got the spare parts that they need. Make sure that they've got the gas that they need. They get the electricity also that they need from their European partners. It takes a lot of work, it's a lot of coordination, it's a lot of work on the ground. But I know that this is ongoing, and the EU is ready to do everything that's in its power on this front. But again, going back to what I think are two very important things: mobilizing frozen Russian assets and sanctions that have some bite.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree. I think everybody will join you in hoping that that kind of pressure that gets exerted by Western countries can force Russia to the table and bring a kind of lasting, just, and fair peace. But in the meantime, obviously, Ukraine requires significant amounts of support to ensure it can continue to keep the lights on and defend its territory. Many of the Baltic countries have been kind of critical in providing some of that support, from bits of old thermal power stations to generators. What are you guys doing this year to support the Ukrainians? Just give me a flavor of the kind of work that you're engaged in, and what more you think the rest of the EU needs to do.
Yeah, so I think one of the major things that the EU has already done, and what was happening at the time of this full-scale aggression, was the synchronization of the European networks to the Ukraine networks to the European networks, and the help that the EU can provide via sending electricity at a critical time when the power stations are down is something we must continue to do as much as possible, and I think we are doing that. Regarding the supplies, so in the first years it was much easier to send supplies because you had these extra supplies from the old times available somewhere. This is drying up because once you send all the stuff away, then there's not that much left.
No one's making new old equipment.
And then at the same time, your own network providers need to stockpile critical components to have their minimum level. But what we constantly do is look around. So if we can send something and it's needed, then we will obviously do it. And that's something everyone can do. So there's a list by the Ukrainian government saying what they need, and constantly come through it and see what you can provide. And obviously there's also a good fund where you can put in money by the government or by others that they can buy what they need. Because if we don't have these components, then they need to be manufactured, and then that needs to be paid off.
And give me a sense of kind of where those discussions have been most productive. You know, is it among EU countries and your counterparts in EU capitals, or is it, you know, as part of the coalition of the willing? Has there been enough kind of concentrated focus on support at all those various levels?
There is support.
Practical support, I mean.
Yeah. These discussions are happening on multiple levels, obviously, and also on the Energy Council, on the European level. In the end, each country, each company will decide what they can provide and then when, and then these will go on to bilateral levels, these discussions with the Ukrainian side.
Yeah, and then Sonia as well. I mean, you know, you guys have been intimately involved in some of that support for Ukraine and learning the lessons from how the Ukrainians operate. From your sense, is enough being done to shore up the access for power this winter and
Yes, for sure. I mean, it's a daily question and a daily conversation we have with Ukrainian operators and together also with, I must say, the distribution operators working very well at the big our overhead lines and also the distribution level down to the customer. So we're constantly in conversation about what we need, but also the transfer of electricity every day. Of course, there are, as you know, rolling blackouts in various parts of Ukraine because it's under attack, but once it brings it together, we're there to ensure that they have supply, but also looking at components. So as Janos said, we have support through across all of Europe, and so we has European Union TSOs, but also non-EU TSOs. So we also rely upon all European operators to support, and they're giving a huge solidarity to Ukraine at this time. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining for what was, I think, a really interesting discussion and a timely one, given, you know, negotiators were up until 1 a.m. last night, and I believe we've just heard from Commission President Ursula von der Leyen about the Repower Plan. I'd like to thank you again for joining. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us in person and online, and to Victoria for obviously doing her best to dial in. Please join me in showing appreciation for our panelists. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, hi everyone. So we're going to take a short coffee break and we're going to resume our programming at 10:30. So please do be back here in 20 minutes sharp, and we look forward to seeing you then for our next panel. Thank you.